All right, Jeremiah, thank you so much, sir. How you doing? Oh, we buffered up a little bit here. There
Oh,
we
no.
go. All right. There we go. All right. So let me say, first of all, thank you very, very much for taking part in this today and taking the time. I am very, very excited to talk about your body of work and then the new Reginald the Vampire. This is a new series that you have coming out here, I believe, later this year, right?
Hello, can you hear me? Yeah,
Yep. Is it?
I'm doing this on my phone. People are phoning in, and there's something I can do when they phone in.
Oh, right.
We go blank,
Right.
so
Right.
I
Okay.
apologize.
Yeah, no,
Um,
not a problem, not a problem. No, I was just mentioning, I'm so excited. You have a new series coming out, Reginald the Vampire. That's due out later this year, correct?
it's due out midsummer. Yes.
Oof, I'm
Yeah.
so excited. I'm very, very excited for that. That's going to be absolutely awesome, and we're going to be digging into that further a little bit later here. But I wanted to say, first of all, thank you very much for taking the time today. Absolutely awesome. I'm very stoked to dig into the material that we are today. Thank you.
Okay.
First of all, let me ask, so, if we were to close our eyes and imagine your local movie theater, taking this back to, your childhood, tell us what comes to mind as far as sights, sounds, or maybe something that was, very special to the theater and your experiences as far as coming up. And I know that you've touched on seeing Dr. No with your father at a very early age. Bring us back to some of those things and what made your theater special to you.
Uh, I grew up in Montreal, Quebec, and with no, there was no, for me, central kind of focus on becoming a part of the movie industry. I mean, it really didn't exist in my world. There were certainly a move of documentaries through the National Film Board of Canada, and but generally speaking, my local movie theater, I remember it very clearly, had programs Saturday morning, and they would have westerns and sci-fi, and Flash Gordon and all these kinds of like fun little, you know, I'm not going to say they were two reelers, but they kind of felt looking back that they were that. I'm not going to say that I was inspired by them, but I was certainly entertained by them, and
Sure.
so I developed somewhat of a love of movies, but not in the kind of traditional tropes of Hollywood. And then I knew I was going to be a movie director, and I got a little camera. And no, that wasn't my focus. I've always been a person who's kind of creatively driven, obsessively or not, healthily or not, to create things today that didn't exist yesterday, and that's always been my kind of operative
Sure.
move. And so as I grew older, I was very interested in drawing, lithography, etching, and all of those things. And yet, I do remember a profound experience of going to see my first, what I would consider adult movie, maybe. And that was Dr. No. And I'd never seen anything like that before. And it literally, I remember the experience blowing my mind, um, especially when Honor Blackman walks out of the water. I mean, for like, wow, that was
Okay.
that was like life changing. Um,
Sure.
and it was fun, in later years, working with Connery and reminiscing about all of that was just a nice closing of the circle somewhat.
Yeah, yeah.
And that was in many ways a gift of fate, which I appreciated. Uh, but but I do remember that movie as being sort of a bellwether in what movies could do, where they could take you. Of course, as I matured and moved on with my life, there was a repertory theater. I mean, those of us lucky enough to live in LA, so to speak, have the Beverly that Tarantino owns that
Mm,
continually replays old films projected.
yeah.
And the repertory, we would go there, I think, Friday nights with a group of us, no matter what, smoke a joint, go into the theater. And if it was if it was Antonioni or Kubrick or Eight and a Half or like all of the great European directors, Ozu Japanese directors, of course the Italians were profoundly influential in that kind of, again, the ability to take films and make something new, surrealistic, unconventional, from the what American noir was doing, which when I went into university, I was lucky enough to study with John Grierson. John Grierson, if you don't know who he was instrumental in setting up the National Film Board of Great Britain, and
Oh, wow.
and which was in the war, and of course. Influential for the kind of counter propaganda that was happening out of England. He eventually was labeled a communist and he had to leave. He came to Canada. I was still living there. And McGill University, where I studied, had hired him to give a lecture. And so he was lecturing to a great group of the history of films because he knew Chaplin and he knew Leni
Mm.
Riefenstahl. And so he gave us the gift of seeing all of these great American movies, great European movies, historical, otherwise. He was a great producer of documentarian films. In fact, he I believe that he coined the term documentary. So he made
Oh,
a
no kidding.
great movie called Mail Train, which was a study of a mail train. And Nanook of the North, he produced a Robert Flaherty movie. So he was really in there. And he did give these small 7 people classes one-on-one. He was quite aged then. He was in his 80s. And I was lucky enough to be part of that, and I became his assistant for the last year or two of his life, which meant, going to the liquor store and bringing him to his. But I felt he was very influential in my understanding of film writ large, of what that means. And I just
Wow.
got a text from Jacob Batalon, who is watching this live stream, and the star of Reggie the Vampire. Shout out to
Awesome.
Jacob. And
Yeah, awesome.
anyway,
Very excited.
bottom line is, as the kind of evolution of my kind of film influences started to kind of come together, and I was studying theater at McGill, so I was very enamored with, of course, playwright staging, lighting, and over all acting. I'm not as an actor, but directing.
Sure. Okay.
Directing actors, what it meant, how to kind of just set a table for the best performances on stage at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Parallel to that, of course, I had parents who believed in education. I had studied classical music. I knew how to read and write music. I was very into, like I said, painting. And so, with film's influence, music, composition, and my father was a photographer, so I had picked up a camera at a very early age, and I've never put it down since.
Hmm.
And so all these seemed to come together in later life, because I did not do my first film until I was probably close to 40, I think, though I had done commercials, that's for sure.
Right.
In my 30s, did a lot of commercials. And before that, still photography, both as an artist and a commercial photographer. So it all seemed to kind of come together, filmmaking, where you become sort of, a neo, false expert in a lot of little ways and a master of none, but a way to kind of
Right.
pull it all together and at least offer people a direction. So
Sure.
that was
Sure.
really, if I look back on it, and maybe I'm being, sort of, false historical, because a lot of this is what opportunities you get as a human, if you're lucky enough not to have to, struggle out of just feeding yourself, which I did. I mean, I left home early and it was on my own very early, and everything that I have, not doing this boastfully, but I'm saying that I also struggled, but through that struggle, I was always in a community of like-minded artists, whether they be painters or
Right.
poets or writers, and that community was so effective on on kind of just allowing me to feel a comfort in who I was. That there was a, no matter what, I could be creative, and there would be a creative community for me to relate to, and it wasn't dependent on how much money I had, what kind of social signaling, new term, that I had. Then it was just a flow of musicality, poetics, writing, cinematics, photography, sculpture, and science, because around that time I was always very kind of forward focused through my photography on holography, very early days,
Hmm.
early days. Sorry, I'm getting these messages. Early days in the world of kind of the combination of science and photography in holography and some.
Oh, let's see. There we go. No, that's awesome.
The
Got you back here. And it's funny too with having that community. As far as the power behind that, and some of the things with maybe your parents telling you, like, well, kind of concentrate on school and different things, but having that community of like-minded people and people that are that are behind you and really pushing and have the same outcome. That's a strong thing. It's a stronger thing. Maybe not necessarily in the time that you're going through it, but once you finally get beyond it and you achieve some of the goals that you're going for, you're like, man, I'm glad I was surrounded by those people.
Yes, I mean those people, many of whom have survived, like I, and are very very interested in making art and being expressive.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm in touch with many of them from that period, as I am, and some of them have achieved what I consider greatness in the world of art. And
Beautiful.
I continue to just drip along, and I'm lucky enough to have created enough opportunities for myself, taking advantage of others. So I just remain creative daily, and that gives me a lot of positive appreciation of where I'm at right now.
Sure, and I can appreciate too, even seeing your page. Looking through your Instagram and your Twitter and all the things artistically that you still do. On top of directing or even the photography that you do, you have different images and different things that you put out all the time. So painting and drawing, that's a continual medium for you as well. Then, right?
Well, it is. They kind of they attach different parts of my brain. Obviously during the pandemic, where I just stayed in my studio here, I was able to be very productive, as I usually am, and spend time with myself, and it
Mm,
was very productive. And for that period, instead of going stir crazy, I really did appreciate it, and I got into a different rhythm of creating. I would be up super early, which I normally hate to do, and I would go to sleep very late, and I would literally segment my days into that. Now, when you make movies, it's a very different story because there you're managing 200 people. It's you're creating maybe a center point, a hub, as it were, to provide everyone with opportunities to do their best work in the environment you're creating to tell whatever story. And
mm.
that's very exciting because you're working with a family, a community, all that energy, which is very exciting should it go your way. If it doesn't, it becomes a
Right.
nightmare. But again, I'm lucky, and with the people I've been able to work with, I haven't suffered many fools or toxic environments. So I've been good that way.
Beautiful.
But both of them, working by myself with um, no adjustment to how I guess a audience or individuals, in fact, would respond. It was just as an individual, I just pure expression of what I wanted to put out there. People found it great. If they didn't, it was okay because I just had to get it out. And over that period, just before the pandemic, I had a very, very big show in Buenos Aires at the Museum of Architecture and Design, another one in a gallery, and starting up sort of a global exhibition process of my artwork. And, some of it is on my website, which is www.chechik.com or tinroof.com. I have another site, tinroof.studio, which is an evolving site of, more experimental work.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I post different things on Twitter and Instagram as well, just to put it out there. Not, the endorphin rush of likes are not kind of principle in my world, but it's nice for me to get feedback from artists all over the world, and I've in fact developed relationships with artists globally through Instagram, because I don't follow people who take pictures of their food or their refrigerator or their bicycles or whatever. You know what I mean? It doesn't really do it for me, but I use Instagram as a gallery. So
Sure.
I do follow, galleries, museums, artists individually, collectives, and so if I need that kind of interactive hit of just going out to a museum, sometimes, I mean, it doesn't change the kind of in-person experience
Sure.
of standing in front of a painting and just drinking it in, or minting an NFT in person at a gallery like Bright Moments. We can talk about that later too.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but the conditions of doing a movie, the conditions of working on a television series, and the conditions of being a kind of purely expressive artist are all running in parallel, and I'm not even sure how they influence each other, except that they come through me. That's it.
Sure. Okay. I mean, and one thing I can appreciate about even your story with listening to more interviews and kind of looking back into is the integrity behind everything you've mentioned. Just the rush of likes, or whether or not it's something to where you're going to have. I can't remember what movie specifically it was. Maybe with Clint Eastwood, you were mentioning where you're like, I don't think this is something that's going to be, necessarily made, and I don't think that anybody's going to go for it. I think I might pass, and you're like, kind of shot myself in the foot for that one, but
Not
but
really. No,
but
no, no
no,
regrets
okay,
there. And,
okay,
and
yeah,
just to contextualize it for people who are listening, before I made a movie, and I was engaged with Warner Brothers, who were sending me scripts, and one of the scripts they sent me was what was it called? Oh, Cadillac, Pink Cadillac,
Pink Cadillac. Okay, yeah, that's
and they
right, that's
said, "Oh,
right,
Clint Eastwood is going to do this," and I said, "This is nuts. Clint Eastwood's never going to do such a
right,
movie,"
right.
and passed. But the script, reflected everything that I did not want to do. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? So there you go. But
Yeah,
but
yeah.
and have no regrets. I think I probably would have done Dirty Harry, right? But they didn't
Right.
offer it to me, right? Far
Yeah,
more experienced and better director than I did that. So,
right.
along the way, one, always faces these forks in the road, opportunities or lack of them.
Hmm.
And you're forced to make choices, sometimes for commerce, sometimes for art, sometimes for emotion, that lead you down these paths. And you have to then own that and work with it and do what it is. And then have, you can regret your decisions, but then you have to move on from them. They can't really define, they can't define you moving forward. So,
Sure. Okay. Well, I appreciate that for sure. With something, as far as always being someone, visually, or someone, kind of interested in the inner workings of things. Bring us back to a time as far as maybe going to your local theater, or walking by and seeing a poster, a movie's poster, or possibly even a play. What is something that comes to mind as far as something that drew you in? And if you went to see the movie, was the movie as good as the artwork was?
it's an interesting question, and I could say that I don't think I've ever seen a movie because I liked the poster.
Mm,
However, there
okay.
have been posters, generally any Saul Bass poster
Oh,
that
yeah.
exists, from
Okay.
his Otto Preminger movies, The Man with the Golden Arm,
Mm,
Vertigo. Those are the graphics on those were so powerful that I very much was drawn to see the movie, not because of them, but alongside of them. I just felt that they were drafting a work that had a very specific integrity of design.
Hmm.
In other words,
Okay.
if the producers were smart enough to hire someone as genius as Saul Bass to make their movie poster, rather than just sticking a picture of their stuff on it with some graphics and go for it,
Yeah. Yeah.
I was typically drawn to it because I knew that all aspects of the photography, design, script, and acting, theoretically, it wasn't always the case, but theoretically would cohese in the movie. And more often than
Right.
not, I was right.
Yeah. Okay. I
I
love
hope
that.
that
Yeah, for
sort of is
sure.
a circle around your question.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think I like too that you mentioned where it's almost like a cohesive thing where it's not, I saw this because of this, but as a thing where I'm hoping that it kind of adds to it, and if anything, maybe even complements the whole overall picture of going to see the movie and then enjoying that too. I like that. That's a good way to put it. Are there anything as far any sort of any scenes that pop up to you, that are just something that have been forever ingrained in your brain, whether seeing those early action movies as a young man, or diving into horror movies and seeing something where you're like, I can just never forget this in my mind. Does anything come to mind as far as scenes that have been forever ingrained in your brain?
Well, I mean, there's so many scenes by Hitchcock. Maybe it's because when I was kind of watching those movies, I was just drinking it in a different way. I was that thirsty.
Mm.
So I mean, you could mention, running along George Washington's nose, or Vertigo, being chased by the plane, or just in a crowd, everybody's pointing. That's him. He's, get him. He's guilty. And you know what I mean? Jim Stewart going like, "Wait, you got it all wrong." That, or any opening of a Bond film, of course, Nights in Calabria. The celebration of the joy on the streets in Italy. Zabriskie Point, the shot of the house blowing up in the desert. I mean, there's just too many
Mm.
to kind of mention. Um, all of them kind of stick in your brain, whether they're influences or not, writ large. I don't know. I can't say, but they certainly accumulate in terms of one's appreciation of the work that you're doing and the respect that you have to pay the medium that you're working in.
Mm, I love that. I love that. You've mentioned in an interview, films are about endings, and television shows are about the beginnings and setups. What
Yeah.
what comes to mind as far as possibly a movie that the ending just wrapped everything? It was just it was a beautiful thing. You felt completely fulfilled. Does anything come to mind as far as a film?
Well, I think most movies that are successful as stories land because when you walk out of the theater, you feel that complete. You think, wow, that was a meal. We had it, and there's something to digest. Um, I think in today's kind of more pop movies, and of which I'm as big a fan as anybody,
Mm,
those movies are in a way serialized, so they always end on a little bit of a cliffhanger, and yet they do land in solving the problem that is outlaid in generally the first act or at the end of it. Um,
all right.
and I'm talking about sort of the commercial movies that exist. Certainly, if you're going into more experimental movies or European movies or movies that are not dependent on box office to get funded, because there's a lot of different financing mechanisms that movies depend on that are not, say, the U.S. model where it's all
Mm-hmm.
box office or streaming. But so those have a different, what one could really see that's a little bit different. But if you go out of a movie that ends on a what the fuck, did I just waste 2 hours and I never got anywhere? Or the main character is as bad at the beginning as he is at the, you know what I mean? Or they were going to rob the bank and they all the prep and yet they didn't rob the
Didn't.
bank. You know what I mean? Like they decided not to. Those, I'm kind of using a metaphor here, but television is always about you set up the characters first, and
Mhm.
it's the characters, whether they be conflicted or their desires or all of that stuff that goes into the kind of dynamics of character interaction, which creates the story or the plot, which continually changes as the characters change and their needs change and their alliances change. And
Mhm.
so as you get to the end of like 1 hour or half hour, it just promotes another question, which is generally answered either in the next scene or the next episode. Those are kind of a new vernacular that we are seeing. I mean, maybe the early Flash Gordon, two reelers and those kinds of
Okay.
movies did that. The serial, you're hanging on a cliff. That's the cliffhanger
Right.
metaphor, in real life. But I think that I'm drawn to television. I did a show. It was one of the producers on it called The Bronx is Burning, and that was an
Oh, right.
8 hour series on the New York Yankees in 1977 and the politics around it in New York and the Son of Sam murders, all kind of intertwined into this one year. It was based on a great book, and I did all eight. It was like a movie, like an 8 hour movie, very complicated to direct. And in fact, we were writing as we were going, which made it even more complicated. But
Oh, wow.
another story, another for another day. But but but
Right.
but but it really was satisfying because the actors were so good and the characters were so good that the dynamics of a kind of parallel to Aristotelian tragedy, you know, where you have these kind of Greek tragedy, really, two sons vying for the love of the king, do battle against a common enemy and then against themselves, and the end is ashes. So that, that's how I approached it, and I kind of try to inform every scene with that kind of universality, even though it was about baseball and murder and politics.
Right. Right.
Um, but it wouldn't have made sense as a 1 hour or 2 hour movie. It had to be 8 hours, and it was an 8 hour, and then it was over because the cycle of intentions of the characters ended. With television, you have the opportunity of keeping it going as long as those characters remain fresh, changing, and working through whatever they're working through. And the
Hmm.
skill of the writing staff is to create that without any kind of jumping up and down in the same place. So
Okay. Right. I think something too with mentioning that with the mini series and having like the 8 episodes, it was something more. I feel complimented overseas. Maybe the UK area where they have something that is just you're going to have one season or maybe a couple 3 seasons. They're going to tell the story they want to tell, and then that's it. There was no intent of that. Like more recently, a show called Atypical that was on Netflix. That was something that people had kind of asked, "Oh, why are you ending?" And you just looked into it further, and they're like, "Well, this was what we wanted to tell. This was a story we wanted to tell, and that was it. There you go."
yeah,
So I
and
appreciate
often
that.
it's the opposite. You have Steve Conrad, who I do not know, but I'm an enormous fan
Mm.
of his work. Did a show uh, called Ultra City Smiths, which I just
Oh
cannot
yeah.
recommend enough. But it's done entirely with plastic dolls, and it's a like a New York cop noir, brilliantly written and executed. And it ends, and you just expect, well, when's the next episode? And I guess not enough people were drawn to the sex appeal of those
Oh,
particular plastic puppets, all done in stop motion.
that's too
And
bad.
yeah, he also had done a show called Patriot, which was genius, as well as Perpetual Grace Limited, which should have gone on and on and on. So in television, the dynamics are a little bit different also because the audience response measures it. I was involved in a show
Right.
called The Middleman, maybe 8, 9, 10 years ago, I forget. A spectacular show written by Javi Grigio Marxwatch and supremely acted, very ironic, half hour, really unusual. But it only, we were so happy to get it on for a year because of its surrealism and weirdness that we were happy to do it for a year. We would have wanted it to continue, but it was just
Mm.
before streaming really hit, even though we had an audience weekly solidly of 1 million every week, never went up, never went down. the network finally said, no, it's too little, and they cut us loose. In the streaming world, we'd be heroes. So timing, what I'm trying to say is timing and media have a lot to do with whether or not a show continues.
Programming. Yeah.
Not whether it's dramatically successful, because as we know, you look at a show like Law and Order, which I think
Hmm.
is 25 years old. I don't know.
Right.
Um, and do we know that much about the characters? Maybe not that much. It's not
Yeah.
really about that. And so there is a kind of not a lean forward in looking at those shows. There being network shows, you can kind of lean back. They're designed in a different way. They're not as literary. You don't have to pay that much attention. There's always someone at the beginning of the second act who goes, now let me get this straight. What you're saying is, and they recap the whole first act, and this all happens so you could be sitting there, reading a magazine, paying attention. It's just enough engagement so that you feel kind of relaxation in
Yeah.
the
Right.
television world. And then,
Right.
but you can't really watch Breaking Bad like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's a show you have to really lean forward and pay attention because it comes from a different way, even though the medium of streaming is the same, or the medium of broadcast is the same. It's a different. You have to be aware as a director, producer, creator, writer, of where the targeted audience is, where that demographic lives, who you're trying to reach,
Hmm.
because you're not going to reach everyone in the world. You know.
Right. With the Bronx is Burning, was that something initially even in the writing that was planned as a mini series, or was that something that was initially supposed to be a film and ended up becoming a series?
No, no, it was always planned as a mini series from the
Okay.
get go. It was always going to be 8 hours, and there was a book that was very very well written and took the history of all the events in it over 1 year. So it
Mm.
had a beginning,
Mm.
middle, and end. You knew where all the characters were going. You knew what their dynamics were in the relationships culturally to sports, and both internally and externally. So just dramatizing those. Gordon Greisman wrote the script and did an amazing job of it. In taking these kind of bellwether sequences and scenes and dramatizing them from the inside. So it just gave the viewer a different view, sort of inside baseball, as it were, or
Sure.
inside the cops' world as they kind of move through New York, trying to desperately find the son of Sam.
Mm. Mm. Wow. Yeah. So as far as before film, your interest in photography came now your father was a photographer you mentioned, right?
My father was a photographer. I grew up around cameras. I've always had a camera in my hand. I've taken, hundreds of thousands of pictures. I've explored all different kinds of photography, from, large format landscape photography to, street photography with Leicas, and digital photography, as it kind of evolves and one could apply different techniques to it. But so I've
Mm.
always maintained a kind of really aggressive fascination with the world of photography. I do a podcast for those interested called The Future
Hmm.
of Photography, and with Chris Marquardt and Adrian. We have a good time. We've done a lot of them, and they're fun. We talk about how photography is going to, kind of evolve. We're on YouTube and, of course, on your favorite podcast channel. So
Yeah.
there you go. So that's me.
Okay. So with that, I didn't want to do such a hard, transition, but where I was kind of getting with that, as far as where did your first personal camera come from? Was it something that was gifted from your father? Did you
Yeah.
go and
My,
work up some allowances? How did that
no,
go?
my father gave me a Rolleiflex twin lens reflex, which I still have.
Wow, no
Two
kidding.
and a quarter. It still works. Yeah.
Mm.
And then the first camera I ever bought was a speed graphic, like Ouija with a big flash.
Okay,
You know what
wow.
I mean? That took plates,
Yeah.
and then I think I bought an Asahi Pentax as a 35 millimeter camera, and I bought that with an enlarger and all the chemicals and Time Life books on photography, and taught myself how to develop and load cartridges and print. So I'm kind of self-taught really as a photographer. I never studied it.
Huh. Okay. Well, did any sort of happy accidents come out of these earlier, processes of trying to, develop film or, taking pictures, certain things where later on people are like, where did you learn that? It's like, I don't know, just trying
I,
stuff.
I would say all my work is a happy accident. I just delve in. It's a difficult question to answer because making a photograph has a lot to do with serendipity and intention and technique. And so you could set out to take a walk and go, I'm going to capture some event, some moment on the street about humankind. That's my intention. Load up my camera with like high speed film, very grainy, to capture it at high speed and go out kind of with this kind of view to seeing the world through that. And all of a sudden you turn the corner and like the light hits a building and the street is empty and there's this absolutely glorious graphic moment, and you go, oh my God, look at that. Boom, and you take it. And under normal conditions, you would go like, oh, if only I had a large format camera and a tripod and we're able to capture every little detail of it. But no, now this incredible landscape lit in front of you, or urbanscape, is now like shot at 1600 ASA, very grainy, black and white. And people look at it and go like, oh, fuck, I love the fact that you did this in grain and black and white. So there, that's really what I'm getting at is sometimes you have to go with what's in front of you rather than with your absolute intention. And other
Sure.
times, I did a show here in, I think, 2017 or 18 at the show gallery of very large prints on glass that I had shot in Joshua Tree at
Hmm.
dawn.
Wow.
I'd gone there with a friend. We had kind of scouted where we were going to set up, marked it on a map very carefully, the longitude and latitude, walked in, because we then went to all of these places in the dark and set up in the dark. So we had to pretty well know, and it's not like there's a lot of street lights in Joshua Tree. Let me tell you, dark is dark,
Okay.
and then set up. And as the light starts to rise, then you start to take these pictures, and that's the opposite. So you're there. I was working with a Hasselblad digital Hasselblad, because I wanted absolutely beautiful rendition. The prints were massive. They were 60 by 50 on glass, in editions of three, and they almost look like screens, brilliant in color. And,
Wow.
and so, that's another way of looking at photography. I mean, that was a very specific intention, driving, what is it, 2, 3 hours from here, marking, the day before and making sure that you're in the right place and waiting for the right light and using the right gear to capture. And on the other hand, just slinging a camera over with another intention and going with the serendipity is good. Or using your iPhone, which is now becoming a superb instrument for capture, I think.
Which is amazing. You think of, even in your lifespan with, the utensils that you had earlier on to now just something that's in your pocket and you can pull out and just
Yeah,
click something
sure.
and save it and send it out to the world. It's like,
Well,
wow.
there's the common quotation of the best camera is the camera you have on you, right?
Mm, mm. Yeah,
If
there,
you don't
there it
have a
is.
camera on you, and people tend to have it. And the other thing about shooting with an iPhone is you can get really close to communities and dynamic things that are happening because everyone has it. No one feels that self-conscious being captured by a iPhone anymore.
Yeah, sure.
Because also
Okay.
you're looking at the screen and people don't know, are you looking at your Insta account, or are you taking a
Yeah.
picture of me, or are you reading some text? I mean, who knows? And yet, even when you're shooting it, people go, ah, it's not professional. It's just there. And that you have a lot of amazing photojournalists now who are using it because it allows them a non-invasive moment to go into a community or the appearance of non-invasiveness. And I think there's some dramatic stuff certainly coming out of Ukraine too that
Mm.
are great, but
Oh
that
yeah.
doesn't discount geniuses like Lindsay Addario who are doing at their risking their life to capture images that are profound and affect us. So
Wow. Yeah,
hats off.
that's amazing for sure. Yeah, and to think, I mean, to think too that there are, professionals out there that solely shoot off of iPhones. That was something, I mean,
Yeah,
for a little while I
sure.
didn't realize was the thing. And why not?
Why not? I
Why
mean,
not?
I think that the latest movie called Kim by Soderbergh was shot on an iPhone. I could be mistaken, but I think so. It's beautiful. It's fantastic. It's
Whoa.
great. Great film.
Wow.
Really great.
I'd have to look into that. I
Yeah,
haven't heard of
yeah.
it. Wow, that's insane. I know that I've seen different shorts and I've seen different things solely shot on it. Where you look at it and you're like, well, I had no
Yeah,
idea.
yeah. He doesn't have a lot of fear about mixing and matching technologies from, large format 65 millimeter to
Yeah,
iPhones. It's all about story at the end of the
yeah,
day.
sure, okay. Is there anything that comes to mind as far as when you went out and you shot something? You were mentioning, the landscape of the Joshua Tree and doing different things, and something being so beautiful that it inspired you to return back when you were working on a film set and you wanted to use that as a location. Is there anything that comes to mind from something like that?
I'm gonna say yes. I did a little indie movie maybe 8 years ago called The Right Kind of Wrong, which was shot all in Banff and Canmore, Alberta, in the mountains. Absolutely stunning location.
Hmm. Oh.
And you know, though we knew we were going to shoot there, we were scouting all over the place. I was shooting lots of landscapes, and the landscapes that I shot, I've never really put these out, but they're really powerful because the landscape, the light, and everything is so dramatic in those places, and that informed the look of the film, which I then brought to the cinematographer, and we kind of moved ahead with that and created that look or feel in the kind of world of the dramatic or comedic in that case film.
Okay. Now, how many? You'd mentioned doing um, having showcases and do it in different. How many showcases have you had as far as posting up and I don't know if it was for sale or if it was just something that was purely for a show. Have you done as far as your imagery?
Are you talking about art shows like
Yeah,
gallery shows?
gallery. Yeah, right.
Well,
Correct.
I mean, I guess the latest one that I did was at Bright Moments gallery here in Venice, but now kind of global. Bright Moments is a DAO, decentralized autonomous
Mm.
organization, and one of the early DAO members of it when it was just a small little place in Venice. Now it's open in New York and currently in Berlin next week for in
Wow.
real life minting of NFTs and digital art. And I showed my digital art there, and there was a big opening, and it was a successful show. So that was my last one, and that was just maybe 2 days before I left for location to start work on Reginald the Vampire. So it's very,
Okay.
very recent.
Okay.
So
Okay.
and
Is
for go
is
ahead.
the in-person minting of the NFTs, is that something relatively like in the last couple of years that's been that's been something kind of brought to fruition as far as that I've come familiar as far as with NFTs and then different things as far as people doing a showcase or galleries from that, but what is the minting of
Yeah.
them?
Well, again, without getting too much into the weeds, which is a much deeper, longer, more complex conversation, one could
Mm-hmm.
say that the evolution of the digital work NFT world uh, in art, which really exploded during the pandemic significantly, but really started maybe early in 17 with punks. But what it did is it allowed people to experience, create, mint, and sell, present and sell work without really any engagement with other humans except online. And Bright Moments was founded to create a in-person, real-life experience that was around communities of people, artists, collectors, and community who
Hmm.
shared the love and interest in digital art and NFT relationship to art in particular. And so by bringing together community members or to establishing a community, which was done through tokenization, et cetera, and I encourage anybody just, Google Bright Moments and you can follow white papers and all of that stuff. I won't have
Okay.
time to
Okay.
get into it, but it really gave a focus intention on the community rather than the economics of it, rather than on the endorphin rush of likes or prices, because we gave away a lot of art, and that art then maybe sold on the secondary market. People held it, whatever. But the experience of growing a community and the intention of Bright Moments is to go to 10 cities, create 10,000, 1,000 of 1,000 minted pieces that are given to the community or invested into the community. And once you have 10,000 people who are all part of the community, then what happens? 10,000 artists, what happens then? I don't know, no one knows, but I'm very interested in that beyond the economics of it. In other
Oh,
words,
wow.
what would happen if there's a kind of collective commonality among a community of creative people who have a singular intention? And does it break down or does it move forward? Does it change? Does it not? So, in some ways, it's a social experiment with some of us who are as optimistic as pessimistic. So we'll see. But it's a road that hasn't been traveled. So, there is something amazing about going to an art opening, not as much to see the art because it's not the best place to see the art. It's better to see it quietly by yourself or with a friend, but to share the love of art with
Mm.
a bunch of people, which is increasingly difficult in the world of COVID, and we miss that. We need that, and so that my last show was very much a part of that.
Wow, that's awesome. And I think that too, having that different medium and having it be something where even over like just talking about like the utensils of the cameras and how it's changed over a lifetime into iPhones and different things, and then now being able to experience it and having it be something where a gallery is online and it's something that's actually appreciated by the art community and not something that's kind of snubbed out. I think that's a cool thing to be able to have, and try to evolve with the ongoing situation that we've had the last few years.
Sure. I mean, I'm fascinated by the kind of investment, certainly, but the kind of creation of what is commonly called the metaverse, and what that means. Though, as I look to it, with land grabs and all of that stuff, and what I see is, in many ways, a failure of imagination, because the metaverse can be anything, and if we're just mirroring the experience that we can have in real life, whether it's architectural, social, or whatever. I'm not saying that that should not happen, but I'm saying we must go beyond that in terms of
Mm.
creating whatever realities we want to try and make at least appear real, whether it's goggles or phones or whatever. We should try to kind of move beyond a mirror of what we have into true new experiences. And I await that. I certainly don't have the time
Yeah.
to do it myself.
Right.
I'm just sitting back waiting for someone brilliant to do it. I do not think it's Mark Zuckerberg.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Currently,
well,
currently the publisher of this particular interview.
right, right. Yeah, it's certainly something I've kind of looked into. At this point, I think I've done so many through this platform where it's just kind of become a fun thing on how far I can take that. But more and more of the Zoom platforms and different things like that become more of a thing where I'm like, well, eventually, I think I'm going to have to move over to something maybe a little bit more common that more people are doing these things through. But fun nonetheless. I would never have this opportunity, so I truly appreciate the opportunity of having things like this, and even kind of touching on that within art and kind of the evolutions of things. Even interviews the last couple of years and things like that, where completely across. I'm in Michigan, you're in California, and still having this opportunity to be able to do something offline and online, and have this is great. It's cool.
Oh yeah, well, the advantages that we have had with kind of the new Zoom meetups, groups, FaceTimes, Twitter Live, Insta Live,
Hmm.
has given certainly in television as an example, we're able to work with writers in a virtual room, and they could be from all over the country or all over the world. It doesn't
Hmm.
matter. Whereas it used to be that you needed to be in Hollywood in a room around a table in order to participate. Now, how does that change the dramaturgy? It does. It may not be as much fun. It could be as productive, but it is certainly exhausting to be on screen. But 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 there is a change, and I think for the most part, that change could be more inclusive of people. And
Mm.
anything in our medium, whether it's still painting, digital work, certainly in movies, television, of being more inclusive with more points of view from more cultural, racial, and kind of scientific points of view, the better it is, the more exciting it is, and well, because it's all about really understanding different people's point of views in an emotional way, not in a kind of intellectual way, but really that emotional connection really gives us much more of a connection with people, a bind with people, because
Hmm.
it's something that we don't have to think it. We just go, that's my sister, that's my brother, that's my mother, that's my father, that's my cousin, and they're that. Even though they don't look like us, they don't sound like us, they have different faith-based experiences or that, but
Right.
the commonality of trying to kind of put everybody in a world through art, through expression, and of course commerce, because that also factors in, is something we need to work harder at. I mean, we do in our own way. We do what we
Hmm.
can. We don't do it enough, but we do what we can.
Right, right, and even mentioning the community, through art that you were saying with with your page, my page being introduced to different filmmakers and artists through Indonesia and Japan and different parts that I otherwise would have never had the opportunity of. But it's absolutely awesome to be able to see that too, and to be able to get the introduction and be able to get some of the feelings through different people that are in Russia and saying that we don't want this going on right now. We don't, it's, just being able to see, the true emotion and being able to speak with people as opposed to what you're seeing on the television or what may otherwise be portrayed. It's
Yeah,
huge.
I think the most profound influences that I've ever had is when I've just gone traveling in fairly dangerous areas, or a very hard to get to areas, whether they be in the jungles of Colombia or across China and Xinjiang, or Patagonia, and running across people, not tourists, but people who live there, and they always ask, "Well, why are you here? Why did you come?" And if you just say, in your broken linguistic challenge, that you're just curious, right? You just wanted to
Right.
know about. It changes the dynamic. There is such an embrace of people needing to feel significant to other people in the world, not
Mm,
invisible.
right.
And I feel that the people that I've met, um, you know, living on rocks with a single goat in a yurt, just adjacent to the Gobi Desert, those people are profoundly influential on what it is to be human and walk the earth, as much as the billionaires that I've happened to have met too, who are equally significant. They have their own trajectory, but
Right.
but and so I look at them as humans in a common way, and I just hope to take in as much of their sensibility and filter it through my own work, whatever that is. I don't know, what's happening tomorrow as opposed to today. I'm
Right.
now focused
Right.
now focused on Reggie the Vampire. So that is my current hyper focus. So
And I
yeah.
can't wait. It's a great transition. We're going to be digging into some of your film first. Just a couple of things, with this being kind of a horror related show and my interests. I wanted to touch on something as far as that you had shared a little while back on Twitter. It was a post titled "The Secret Horrors of John Hughes's Holiday Movies." And in this article, it just kind of compared some of John's work as far as some situations that may have been inspired or have kind of depicted in a real life, scary manner, if you will, just with some of his work. As far as your approach directing Christmas Vacation, was there anything as far as in that, that you would that were inspired from movies that you'd watch that were thrillers or horrors with some of the scenes that were in Christmas Vacation that adapted your approach?
Well, of course, Jason being the obvious one
Yeah.
with the hockey mask,
Yeah.
but and I don't, I it's hard to remember if that was John or me going like, let's put him in a hockey mask with a
The
chain.
chainsaw.
John had him in a chainsaw. I think it was me who went like, let's put like a hockey mask on him and play it out. But I mean, if you look at all John Hughes's films, I mean, you can look at Christmas Vacation as a horror movie with Chevy as being the monster.
Kinda, yeah.
You change, light it differently and all, you know what I mean, and add the music and then add the complications of the in-laws, etc.
Yeah.
I read a script by John. It was never made, and it's a fantastic movie script that he had sent to me. Get when called The Bee, and obviously it was one of his more ironic, comedic, man against life in a small way that destroys everything. And the
Okay.
story was architect working in his office adjacent to an open field where he is building or designing a community to be built.
Mhm.
And so he's working away at it, and the bee gets into his office. And so he gets up to try and get it out, and he can't do it. And, he trips, breaks something, and then he gets angrier and angrier, and the bee kind of moves around. The entire movie takes place in this office, and he destroys his entire life's work. Everything, this bee, it's man against bee, basically. And
Oh my
I just thought,
gosh.
oh God, do I want to make this movie? This is just so good, And it's just one man. Eventually you find out it's Indian burial ground, and you know what I mean. And
Oh,
there's
okay.
some kind of payoff logic at the end to land it right. Of
Oh
the
man.
bee wins. It will not be better, right? Because the bee it has all the spirits of the indigenous, in it, through flowers and all of the rest of it, as I recall. But
Oh my
that's
Lord.
as much of a dark horror movie as it is a comedy. And so when we look at horror movies are very similar to comedy in that
Oh, yeah.
why they work is not in the scare,
Mm-hmm.
but it's in the build up to the scare, the
Mm-hmm.
scare, the pulling back of that rubber band. And we release it through laughter, or we release it through a jump scare. It's kind of the same thing, but you set the audience expectations going down one way, and you start to move it slightly, slightly, slightly until they go, oh no, I really don't know what's going to happen, or don't look around that corner, or please don't step on that board,
Yeah.
whatever it is. And so the release comes, then you want to start to build it up again. And that's different than jokes, obviously,
uh,
because jokes are superseded in horror movies by sort of character darkening, shall we say. You know what I mean? A little bit of
yeah.
mustache twirling or whatever.
Yeah. Okay.
Um, I'm dying to see Ty West's new movie, though. I know him a
Oh,
bit, and that looks
it's
fun.
it's great.
Oh, good. You've
is
seen it then.
is awesome. Yeah,
Yeah. The,
I wanted to
yeah.
see it in theater. I wanted to make that one, and it's awesome for sure.
Oh, good, good. He's very talented. I know
I
we worked
agree.
on a television show a few years ago together. Anyway,
Okay, which one was that
don't
now?
ask me. Don't ask me because I
Oh,
forget the name of it now.
okay, okay, okay. So moving
Some
on here.
someone's gonna kill me for it.
Yeah. No, and I was even going to mention too, even the moments like when the squirrel's in the tree and you finally see, kind of the build up behind that and you finally see it and then it jumps out, it was just like there was definitely, different ingredients in the movie where you see it and over the years and different things, you point out where you're like, that's kind of scary. Or you go
Yeah,
sledding and you're going miles and miles and you can't stop. I think there was something of an article that you'd shared as far as Chevy being like that was a terrible experience. The thing was going so fast and I couldn't slow down.
yeah. Like I've never directed a pure horror film, though I'm developing one right now,
Oh man.
called The Loop, and it's based on an amazing book, which I encourage everyone to read. But yeah, that would be the first one. Whether I produce it or direct it, I don't know yet. But
Oh man.
it's coming along really beautifully. So
Wow.
it's
It's
one of the
awesome.
few genres that I have not worked in,
Okay.
overt genres.
Sure, that's awesome. I'm excited for that. That sounds great. I mean,
We'll
and
see.
Reginald the Vampire, that's something too that kind of touches on that. But
Well,
um,
Reginald the Vampire is a really fun show in that it is, at its heart, it's a romantic, uh, dramatic comedy set in a workplace. So
mhm.
that's the skin of it. It's set in the world of a genre picture, aka the vampire.
Mhm.
And but it moves often in the same scene between comedy, drama, romance, and horror. So
Okay.
it really does move around. It's very difficult for the audience to get ahead of it because you never know where this is going. The
I love that.
characters, I assure the audience, are characters that no one's ever seen before. Jacob Batalon is nothing short of extraordinary. He is so gifted. Um, and we were lucky enough to cast him just as Spider-Man exploded. So that's to our benefit, of course, his. Hey, Jacob. The But he plays a very heartfelt, emotional character that has hit a roadblock in his life, working at what is called the slushy shack, just making ice drinks for people,
Okay.
and by strange fates, is turned into a vampire, and it's based on a series of books by Johnny Truant called Fat Vampire, and
Okay.
there's about seven of these books, and Harley Payton, my partner in crime, we found the book, read it, developed it, sold it, and just made it. So
Awesome. Awesome.
so
Now,
yeah.
there was a little conflicting information just as far as to like IMDb and different things. Did you direct all of the episodes on it? I know
No,
you
yeah,
were the series
whoever,
director.
yeah, whoever put that IMDb first time.
Okay. Okay.
The series, I think it's straightening out now. It's a modern story company production. That's Harley Payton and our company.
Oh, okay.
We have partners, obviously, for financing and all the rest of it. But it basically started with us. We're the executive producers of it. I directed the first two and the last two, so 4 out of the 10. Hired other directors to do two, and two. Um, but hands-on producing, which is a lot more work than directing, I assure you. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, especially when you're directing as well and editing and doing effects and music and all the rest of it. So, but a
Uh,
joy nonetheless. It's been a joy from beginning, and it's just the middle now because we're just in the locking of picture stages for episodes as we move forward. Our main partners are NBC Universal at Sci-Fi, a great group of people
wow. Okay.
they have really let us enough rope to hang ourselves, and but are fully invested in it and love it as much as we do. So we expect it to be promoted we should be at Comic-Con. So we'll be there to
Oh
screen.
man, that's
So
awesome.
yeah, it's been a lot of fun, and it's an unexpected, really powerful, and super entertaining series. And we're cautiously optimistic that we'll go into a second season. Fingers
Wow.
crossed.
Awesome. That is so cool. So
So
cool. And and
the
and you mentioned now the series mentioned is based off of a book here or a series of books. Was there anything, I mean, as far as the visual aesthetic that you the team wanted to add as far as from the lore of vampires that has been around, so
Oh
spanned
yeah,
since the 18th century. What went into
sure.
some of that?
Well, there's nothing in the book that really informs the look of the piece.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
but I kind of wrapped it in what I would consider lollipop colors. So it's a colorful, colorful vampire show, which is, I've never seen that. It has a lot of design. It's very strongly lit, composed, and overall design is effective. The music is also going to be quite unusual. So it does have its own look, which turns every trope. I mean, like we do with everything in the vampire lore, we turn all the tropes pretty much inside out, and that was our intention is to diametrically oppose some of the expectations of the genre while
I love
adhering
that.
while adhering to the conventions of the genre, and so it was a fun challenge. Harley did a great job and kind of writing and supervising the other writers to create a pretty amazing, uh, cohesive story. So,
Wow, man, that's I love that. If you had the opportunity, so you're mentioning possibly a season two, coming up, and if you had the opportunity to, bring back to life, a vampiric role from, may it be a TV series or a movie that you love, who would be somebody that you would include in this second season from out of the Reginald universe?
well, I the universe is very insular, so I don't want to kind of mention a name because that would be weird.
That's fair.
That would be weird. Though there's cameos certainly that I would love to see of the exit, vampires who drift in and out, who are
Okay.
somewhat familiar.
Okay.
Obviously, someone like Stephen Moyer comes to mind from True Blood,
Yes. Okay.
who happens to be a good friend of mine. So if that's possible, I sure will try and do that.
Dang.
But that would be fun. It would just be fun to tip of the hat to some of these
Sure.
older vampire shows. But um, currently, we have an amazing cast that fulfills all of our kind of expectations and ability to kind of really expand both emotionally, comedically, and dramatically into where we think the series is heading.
I love that. And, even just like the stuff that I have seen, or I listened to an interview, about the show here too. And it feels like it is embodying, the fun behind it and, keeping, some of the heavy, content that might come along with what the situation is. I appreciate, you mentioned the coloring and kind of the visual aesthetic and the fun that goes into it, too, because there's a lot of horror movies that are going on right now where I'm trying to think of the term that people use, but it's kind of like a horror, when you go into the genre and you have to maybe watch it a couple of times, or you have to think about, oh, maybe this is what's going on. And there's other times where you just have fun with something and you just sit back and you just enjoy and maybe have some popcorn and laugh at some silliness. I
Well,
love that
yeah,
just as much.
yeah, me too. I mean, like another friend of mine, Stephen Lang, made a movie, and I made another one recently called "Don't Breathe."
Yes, the movie is
I, I mean,
awesome.
yeah, you could say that is a horror movie, where
Hmm.
he's the good monster, right, in a way. And that, I love that movie. I just think, I love siege thrillers in a way. I love the containment in a certain place, and very intense intentions by the characters and how they collide and how one
Yes.
manipulates that both in script and in execution. So I'm a big fan of those kinds of limitations, which often create an extraordinary opportunity to do things out of necessity
Hmm.
that are very inventive and really exciting. So I'm a
That's
fan of
awesome.
that.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. And so you were mentioning Reginald's supposed to be Midsummer, right? As far as the
Midsummer, yeah,
release from it,
yeah.
and it
That's
was on
the current
Sci-Fi.
plan, yeah. Sci-fi. In the U.S., it'll be on Sci-fi. Then it moves to Hulu, where they'll drop the
Oh
series.
man. Okay.
And in Canada, Australia, New Zealand, it's on Amazon, Amazon
Hmm.
Prime. And Europe, our sales team are now there working out with who's going to take it in various territories because we've sold it worldwide. So we're good.
Wow.
It's coming soon,
Awesome.
which means I got to get back to work.
Enjoy the break for now, and then you get back right into the blood and sweat that goes into making these things. I love
That's it.
that. Really quick here, I have two quick things I just wanted to touch on with Christmas vacation. I didn't want to make this whole thing about that. I know a lot of your interviews, kind of span into that, and though I love it and I've grown up with it and it's one of my favorites of all time, I wanted to, focus and especially touch on the new TV series, Reginald the Vampire, which looks absolutely awesome. But before we go, my first question I wanted to ask, as far as they're both the situations in the Walmart with Eddie and Clark. Was it intentional as far as the moment when Clark puts down the light bulb and Eddie just throws the dog food right on top of it and smashes it, or was that something in the moment?
Totally intentional.
Okay. From being a young man, seeing that movie probably before I was 10 years old, I had not noticed that until maybe 5 or 10 years ago, and it was just another moment where I was like losing my mind laughing every time I watch it. Every year I watch it,
I
and I would just pick up on different things. That being one of them is
I
hilarious.
laughed. I laughed when I thought of it. I laughed when I put the bulbs there. I laughed when they did it, and I laughed when I saw it. I don't know. I thought it was kind of funny. It's like
Oh.
just the very wrong thing to do. Anyway,
Was it ADR that was the sound effect of the ball breaking, or was that the dog food smashing on it?
no, no. I mean, we boosted it. We did. We of
Okay,
course,
yeah,
all the sounds are kind of
yeah.
carefully crafted. Yeah.
Okay, okay. And lastly, here, this was something yet again, some years ago, my sister had pointed out the moment that Eddie's, walking in, seemingly possibly has a boner going on or something of the situation, and kind of adjusting himself. Is there something that was intentional there, or was that just kind of a
That's just him acting. You know what I mean? Trust me, that wasn't a direction that I gave him. You know what I mean? Whatever Randy did, kind of, his when he does that a lot in the movie.
okay, yeah,
I didn't ask him to do that. It's just it became a signature.
the character, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I did specifically ask for the black dicky and a tight white sweater. I did that. It was one of my most proud fashion choices of any film that I've done. But generally speaking, all of his kind of ticks and whatnot were self-invented.
Oh.
He knew the character so well, and he was so funny, and so just leave him alone.
Oh,
Roll the
wow.
camera. You're gonna laugh.
Man, that is beautiful. Look, I am very, very excited for Reginald the Vampire. I, year after year, pummel my family with watching Christmas Vacation. And overall, this time, appreciate your work. And I really thank you very much for taking the time today, Jeremiah. This has been absolutely awesome, man. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me, and good luck with the podcast. I hope it wasn't too boring.
No, I love it. I love it. I'm not someone, I'm not overly into the art community, or, at least knowledgeable, so I love having these conversations and hearing some of these things, and being, enlightened into some of these newer, NFT galleries and how this is going too. So I'd like to
Yeah.
check out that stuff and see. And I love, that's the beautiful thing about these, is having these conversations and, being introduced to new things. So thank you very,
And
very much. This has been awesome.
hey, Adam, I see you. You're watching. Adam is our composer, and I can see him. He is.
Okay.
Anyway,
Awesome. Awesome.
thanks, and have a good day. Bye.
Yep, you as well. Take care. Thank you.
Bye.
He's a lo-fi horror guy. Yeah, he's kind of a guy, but he is so lo-fi, lo-fi, a horror guy. Yeah. Lo-fi horror guy has been recorded in front of a live studio audience.